Hi, welcome to ParentingU, a podcast to help you navigate this amazing journey we call parenting. Today, we're excited to welcome back Dr. Nicholas George, pediatrician and internal medicine physician with Our Lady of Lourdes Children's Health. I'm Stephanie, and we're glad you're listening to ParentingU. Welcome back, Dr. George.
Thank you for having me. Glad to be back.
Your phone hack tip from the last time we talked has probably been one of our most engaged with videos and information for parents. So
Awesome.
You're in the Hall of Fame, ParentingU Hall of Fame, the Alumni Hall of Fame.
I'll take that. No, it's a good hack. It's a good hack. I'm fortunate enough my kids aren't quite there yet, so I don't have to implement it just yet.
Yes.
But yeah, it's definitely on our list of things. We're still fighting the not getting the kids iPads, so that's fun. My son finally brought that up the other day to my wife. Is on the way to school is why he doesn't have iPads like his friends, and he had a large lesson in how parents parent differently for different kids and different families, and it's okay. There's no wrong answer.
Oh, yes. I use that many times. Our family makes different choices. We were just on an extended family trip with other families within our large family who had more technology. And so my daughter goes, but they're in our family. I was like, okay, different family.
You're not wrong.
You're not wrong.
My wife had to more so tell my son, like, you can't go and tell kids at school that their parents are doing the wrong thing. Their parents are right.
Yes.
Like,
yeah.
That was the big talking point was, no, you can't go to school and say they're doing it wrong because they're not.
Exactly.
It's right for them. It's not right for you.
Oh, goodness. Well, that's why we're here. That's why we're here today. And so we are excited to talk with you today about keeping our kids safe in the summer. Our whole season of ParentingU is all about summer safety, keeping them healthy, well, safe. And specifically today, we want to talk about being outdoors. So biking, skating, playing, and all the things that come with summer. But how can we have fun, but do it safely? And so why don't you start telling us a little bit about yourself and the work you do with Lourdes?
Sure. Yeah. So again, I'm Nick George. I am one of the med-peds physicians through Lourdes here in Lafayette. I have my clinic out in Scott where I see both adults and kids from birth until we're gone, all the way up till I think my oldest patient currently is 97. And my youngest is a few days old. So it's fun. I enjoy doing that and taking care of whole families and kind of being able to coach on both sides of the ball for the parents and for the kids, but also for the parents and their needs too. So it's a fun niche and I enjoy it.
Well, and we're great at it. And so I'm so glad you took some time with us today. Why don't we start just at the top?
Sure.
Why is it important that kids get outside and play? And because it's summer here in the South, it's brutally hot. So why is it so important, even when it's hot, to get outside?
Sure. Yeah. No. I think getting kids outside for activities, anything like biking, skating, scootering, it's honestly essential for both their physical and their mental well-being. We know that regular outdoor play does help them build strong bones and muscles, improves their cardiovascular health, and can prevent things, and also supporting healthy weights and things, which is also obviously a big topic these days with pediatric obesity. So just getting outside and getting our bodies moving is always important, but also beyond the physical benefits, it's something that can enhance their mood, reduce stress in kids and even in adults, and fosters kind of those social skills when we get out and about and play with our kids or play with other friends. And so even when it's scalding hot outside, obviously doing it at smart times of the day, that's some of the biggest advice for when it does get super hot, is making sure we're doing that in the early mornings or when the sun's going down, when those temperatures are decreasing, and staying hydrated is obviously important. But overall, we just know that regular outdoor play just is so good for kids and even for adults. So it's just one of those things I would definitely recommend even when it's scalding hot.
And what would you say are some of the developmental skills they're learning when they're on things with wheels, like bikes, like scooters, like roller skates, outside of just activity? What else is their brain doing and connecting for them?
Yeah, I think, there's all kinds of hand-eye coordination and just balance and gait. And again, you're building those muscle groups up that are going to help support their skeleton and the balance that you have to be on a bike or a scooter. And so that leads to the concerns, obviously, of doing those things and falling, but mainly those balance skills and hand-eye coordination if we're playing sports, and just the muscular development to help support them throughout the rest of their life.
Well, and I think something that I struggle with, and I've said many times that this podcast is a lot about teaching us as parents and teaching kids, is parents modeling the behavior. Mm-hmm. So I struggle with, I don't want to go outside. I don't want to play. I don't want to ride bikes, but I want them to. What would you say to
Sure.
parents? How would you encourage parents to model this kind of behavior? I've heard tricks about set a timer, set a 20-minute timer, and say, I'm going to come out for 20 minutes, and it goes faster than you think. But how would you encourage parents who may not want to play that it's a big part of showing kids how it's important?
No, I mean, I think first and foremost, one of the best things that parents can do to encourage kids to be active and have active lifestyles is actually by modeling the behaviors themselves. I think that is important, but kids are definitely more likely to ride bikes, skate, and explore outdoors when their parents are doing the same things with them. And I think just making it part of your family time, making it the family activity, weekend bike rides, neighborhood scooter races, trips to the park. And that's going to set those kind of things where you're building habits for those kids. And so, we're just as guilty as kids these days of being on our phones and kind of being dragged down, and we don't want to do that kind of stuff either. It's miserably hot outside and I don't want to go sit out there. But I think I like the idea of a timer. That's one thing, but also making it more fun, playing games, and especially as your kids get older, playing basketball with them, playing baseball with them, and teaching them how to play those sports. But one of the ways we can motivate ourselves is just knowing in the back of our mind that what we're doing is building that foundation for our kids and trying to show them that, like, this isn't just for y'all, this is for us too. We want to be healthy too. We want to be exercising. We make it a point when I let my wife go to the gym whenever the kids are at home on the weekend, if we can't bring the kids with us. But if we can, we bring them with us and put them in the play areas and everything. But we let them know, like, hey, we're going to the gym because we want to be healthy. We want to exercise. We want to get our heart pumping. My son's actually at a fun age where they kind of have like a kids area where they have little equipment and everything. So he comes back sweating now too. And he's like, I worked out too. And we think that's great. But we always make it a point, like on the weekend, if we can't bring them or if the kids area, the gym is closed, we kind of tell them, like, well, where's mommy going? Well, mommy's going to go to exercise. Well, why? Well, because mommy needs to be healthy. Mommy wants to be here for y'all, so she needs to go be healthy. And so we always make it a point to point that out to our kids.
I love that. Yeah.
I think every once in a while my son will try and race me with the bike, but of course you can't beat him. But but I think it's fun to do that with our children and see it as a connection to our kids and being a part of their lives. And I think that's something they'll always remember. And I think more and more we're realizing that kids do pay attention to those types of things. So just really focusing on that as a parent, even when you don't really want to.
Right. That's right.
Becoming part of the bike race or becoming part of the water gun fight when it's scalding hot outside and playing the swimming pool games with them. It does take a conscious effort though, but I'll always encourage you to enjoy that time because it flies.
Well, let's talk helmets. So if we're on a bike, we're on a scooter, what can parents look for to make sure your helmet fits properly? What should they look for when buying one?
This is a personal one for me. No, I think helmets are non-negotiable whenever we're on wheels. I actually did suffer from a pretty heavy head trauma when I was a kid from not wearing a helmet, messing with skateboards and scooters, and I was spent some time in a pediatric ICU. In fact, so I do take the helmets pretty serious. So we can have head injuries that can be very serious, and helmets we do know significantly reduce the risk of traumatic brain injuries. But the key is to make sure that it's fitting properly. You want it to be snug on our kids' heads. We want it level on their head, not really shifting forward or backwards and real kind of finicky like that, and making sure that it's always buckled. And you want it to be tight, but not too tight to where they can talk and everything, but to where the helmet's not going to slip off. So that way, if they do fall, the helmet stays secured on their head and then prevents any kind of traumatic brain injuries.
Well, is there ever a point when kids outgrow the need for a helmet or safety gear? And for how do we say it? Non-vehicular activities. So, of course, ATVs or golf cart, things like that, probably always wearing a helmet. But bikes or scooters or things like that, do kids ever outgrow that, or is it really important? Like,
parents often wonder if they can just outgrow the need for safety gear. I personally think the answer is no. Even as kids become more skilled, they get older, accidents still happen. Older children, they tend to be riding at higher speeds and performing tricks and being a little bit more adventurous, and actually puts them at a greater risk for falls. I do think continued helmet use during those times is crucial. I'm not going to say I'm a saint and wear my helmet all the time, but I do make it a point where, I try to grab it. And my son's actually gotten pretty good about, hey, Dad, where's your helmet? And you're like, you're right. Let me go grab my helmet too. And so we are getting better about that as adults too, because I still think even for us, it's important, even if we're just going 2-3 miles an hour down the road and around the roundabout and all that fun stuff in the cul-de-sac, it's still important for us to model that behavior for our kids. But again, I think as the kids get older, and we think, they're not falling on their bike anymore, but you never know what could happen. I always tell my kids, it's not necessarily what you're doing, but we don't know what other people are doing. So especially today's world where people are on their cell phones in their cars. They may not see your kid playing on their bike in the middle of the road and may have an accident. And again, having their helmet on will prevent any kind of major traumatic brain injuries. And I think that's important even as they get older. So short answer is I don't think you ever really outgrow safety.
Well, is there any other safety gear you would recommend for kids? Knee pads, elbow pads, wrist guards, or any of that necessary?
I think that kind of varies from kid to kid. Some kids don't want to wear, but I do think, the use of wrist guards, knee pads, and elbow pads are important. I think more so whenever they're doing things like the skating and scootering, and they're more likely to kind of reach out and hit those parts of their bodies more frequently. I do think they're pretty good to have on. I can see where those kids may not want to wear that, and you may just have more bumps and bruises. In terms of their efficacy of preventing fractures and things like that, I don't think that's high enough for me to say it's 100% going to prevent those kinds of things from happening. I mean, certainly certain types of fractures may be prevented by like wrist guards and things. So again, if you're on skates and scooters, I think they're a lot more important in terms of preventing those major injuries. But I can see where some kids just don't want to wear all that fun stuff. But they'll learn the hard lesson of scraped knees and wrists, and I think that's one thing to kind of keep in mind as a parent is those things are going to happen.
Yeah, absolutely.
Excellence in care. It's what drives us. At Franciscan Missionaries of Our Lady Health System, we've built our team with one goal: delivering exceptional care for every patient at every stage of life. From everyday checkups to complex conditions, our skilled doctors, nurses, and specialists are committed to excellence, and it shows in the honors and awards we've earned across the region. The care you and your family deserve is closer than you think. Visit fmolhs.org/excellence to learn more.
Well, you mentioned you really don't know what others are doing or paying attention to. And so let's talk a little bit about how we can teach kids to stay mindful of their surroundings when they're on their bikes and skating. So watching for cars, watching for potholes. But how do we do it in a way that keeps them safe but doesn't make them scared to be outside?
For any kid riding on sidewalks or near the roads, learning the basic rules of the road is kind of important, and it's our job as parents to teach them that. We're pretty firm about if we're in a parking lot, our kids have to hold our hands while we're walking through a parking lot. We, even at a young age, my 2-year-old still knows she has to stop when we get to a road, and we say, which way are we looking? Both ways. And teach them to look both ways before crossing any kind of driveways or streets. Even more important, we're still learning the hard lesson of, even if the basketball is rolling away, we don't run into the street to get it. That's a tough one for a lot of kids because their mindset is so, I want to get my ball back. That's a lot of times where you'll see them kind of forget about some of those rules. So, and that's why it's important as parents to be around when our kids are outside as much as we can. And that goes back to being outside with our kids, because things like that can happen. And if we're there, we're constantly teaching them while they're out there to, hey, stop. That's the road. What do? We look both ways and make sure there's nobody coming. I don't care about that ball. I care about making sure a car's not coming. And then when we are riding on the street and making sure that we're going the same direction as traffic. So we talk a lot about, hey, you see how we're on this side of the street and the other car's going the other way on the other side of the street. So that's how we do with our bike. We stay on this side of the street when we're on our bike. That way the cars behind us can see us and we can see the cars coming, and we don't want to be in the same lane as the cars coming because they might hit us. And then depending on your child's age, you can teach them hand signals. So if they are riding on the roads and things, you can teach them the proper hand signals that I'm sure we all forgot when we took driver's ed way back when. But having our arms out from which direction we're turning, even if you don't know if it's the bent or the straight, just pick an arm, and that most people will understand. If you got your right arm pointing in the right side, you're going to turn that way. If you got your left arm pointing that way, they're going to turn that way. So, and that's usually the older kids that are learning how to do a lot of that. But also, I think it's important, especially this day and age with iPhones and I guess iPods are still a thing, but most of us have our music on our phones now. So making it known, hey, we probably shouldn't be listening to music or playing on our phone when we're riding bikes or skateboarding or anything like that, just so we can keep our heads up and looking around and talking to them about, hey, look, that's a hole in the road. We need to make sure we don't hit that. And if you're looking down at your phone, you might do that. Or if you have headphones on, you may not hear the horns honking behind you. So I think it's important to kind of talk about that.
That's been a big conversation with my 11-year-old. She wants to ride her bike with her headphones in, listening to music. And I tell her no every time. And she thinks I'm the worst mother in the world. But I just, like, you can't hear people around you. And she said, well, you do it. I said, well, I do it when I'm walking on the sidewalk. I'm not riding. So
Absolutely.
that
And I
comes
think,
up.
there
It's
can be
gonna
some
come up.
leeway. I mean, I think, if they're old enough to understand and be paying attention to having one earbud, because I mean, most people again have the AirPods now or some type of wireless headphone. So one in rather than both in. I still get on my 70-year-old father about wearing his headphones while he rides his bike without his helmet. So it never ends.
It never ends.
And yeah, he has gotten in
It
bike
never
wrecks, and I
ends.
still get on him about it. But I think having both headphones in certainly it puts you at risk. And even if you are going to do that, like I said, even with one earphone in, I would say having the volume at a level where you can still hear your surroundings and things like that. That way you're more aware. But it's definitely a thing. And then, for the younger kids, it is supervision is kind of the biggest thing. And it doesn't have to be a constant hovering, just kind of setting the clear boundaries, staying on certain driveways, certain distances, using the kind of visual markers. So like in our neighborhood, we're fortunate enough to kind of be in the cul-de-sac area of our neighborhood. So we actually have easy boundaries like, hey, you can go to the end of the cul-de-sac, but don't go in other people's yards, and then if you can't see us, we can't see you. So this is the end on heading back towards the main drag of the road, and just kind of setting those boundaries. And we kind of talk about, we have certain trees that we point out and like, hey, don't go past that tree. Don't go past this tree. And we see a lot of our friends using those same methods with their kids. So when we go to a friend's house, we kind of ask the other parents like, hey, do your kids know their boundaries? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, great. And we'll say, hey, one of my son's best friends name's Hollis. And we'll say, hey, Hollis, can you show Noah the boundaries? And her parents encourage her, like, yeah, show Noah our boundaries. And so they teach each other where their boundaries are when we go to friends' house, which I think is great. I mean, you kind of create those kind of safe play zones where we as parents can kind of, even if we're not playing with them, like if we're sitting out on the patio, talking with each other, we have those visual cues that we know where our kids are supposed to be, and we can kind of keep checking eyes on them and everything. So I think that's all good habits to build.
Yeah.
Until they're, a little bit more, until they're a little bit more older and
that.
independent, and we can trust them a little better about where they're going.
Well, we all know that falls happen. We've all fallen off of our bikes. It sounds like you had a bigger fall than maybe I did. But what advice for handling the inevitable scraped knee, the bruised elbow? What happens then? And then when maybe should parents worry about bigger injuries, like maybe a concussion or a sprain or something like that?
Falls and scrapes are just part of being outside, and I don't think that's any reason to keep our kids from going outside. I think it build some grit, as they say. But no, most of the time, these are minor cuts or bruises that can be managed at home just with good cleaning, bandaging, and then kind of resting. So if you have some scrapes and things like that, things like hydrogen peroxide and alcohol are good for initial cleaning. After that, they actually impede wound healing. So most of the time for my adults and my kids, I say, look, if you have an abrasion or a scrape or a cut, yeah, you can clean it initially with those things. But after that, just use warm soapy water. If you're going out and about, keep the wound covered. You can actually put like a layer of Aquaphor on there or Vaseline. We're kind of getting away from saying Neosporin just because there's been increases in kind of allergic reactions to some of the components of the over-the-counter Neosporins. But a good layer of Aquaphor is good to create a little barrier and also help with wound healing. And then at bedtime, keeping it open is fine and letting it heal. When I would say it was more of a problem, if we hit our head and we start having changes in our children, so a little bit more confusion, slurring our words, loss of consciousness, I would tell you, if your kid hit their head and they passed out, you need to bring them to the ER. That's one of those big ones where, and hopefully, we always say that's understood, but say it out loud anyway. But certainly if your kid hits their head and loses consciousness, you need to bring them to the nearest ER for an evaluation. But, other subtle things that we don't think about is, if they didn't lose consciousness, but they hit their head, but they're not acting right, more confusion, start having vomiting. Those are all signs of a serious head injury and need to be evaluated. So to bring them to the ER. If for some reason we fell and had a deep cut and it just won't stop bleeding and we've applied pressure, we've cleaned it, but it just keeps bleeding, that would be another reason to bring them in to be seen. And then if we ever have one of those instances where our kiddos fall with an outstretched arm or anything like that, and we have severe pain, we see swelling, we see what we might think might be a broken bone, they're not moving their limb anymore. Any of those kind of, you see bulging in that would be another good reason to bring them in to be seen in the ER, get an x-ray real quick, make sure nothing's broken. Because those are some of your more common ones is kids that are skateboarding and scootering, it's a natural instinct when we're falling to kind of stick that arm out. And that can happen on anything, trampolines, bikes, everything. That's a natural instinct. You want to brace your fall. And that's when a lot of those things can happen. So if you notice that and your kid's holding their arm and they're not moving it and you notice swelling, bruising, or you're worried worried about any kind of displaced bone, certainly bringing them to the ER to get an x-ray would be important. But all the while, I think encouraging that outdoor play while prioritizing that safety just helps the kids to stay active and kind of develop that confidence. You don't want to overly hover and decrease their interest, but you want them to be confident in doing and making sure they have all the right gear and clear rules and support from you and do it all safely.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about, and this is kind of a point of personal question, because it was something I grew up with being told about goose eggs. Do we still call them goose eggs? I don't know, but
Sure.
They were called goose eggs for me, and
Yeah.
I had several of them, but they terrify me as a mother because they look scary, but I don't think that they are. So can you explain what those are? Maybe debunk some of the myths about goose eggs.
Sure. I think so. The goose egg is usually a bruise on the top of the skull. So when you have lots of blood flow on your scalp and everything, anybody who's ever cut their head will tell you it's got a large blood supply. So you are prone to bruising. And most of the time when you hit your head, if you have what's called a goose egg, it's usually just a collection of blood or a bruise right there. You just don't, it doesn't purple because we don't see it because your hair most of the time. But usually that's an okay sign that there's nothing serious going on. And again, I really would lean on that it's also not a indicator of how severe a head injury was. So again, looking for some of those other signs that we spoke of earlier, the kind of confusion and nausea and vomiting and changes in kind of attitude, those would be more concerning. Even if you have a goose egg, I don't think it's a good rule of thumb to say, oh, it's swelling on the outside, it's not swelling on the inside, because you could have both. So again, if they hit their head, still making sure they didn't lose consciousness, and you're looking for some of those signs and symptoms. But usually if you hit your head, you're going to have a little goose egg, and that can be completely normal and not too concerning, again, as long as you don't have any of those other symptoms ongoing. It's just a normal part of life and not too severe, and it should go down with time.
So do we or do we not push a goose egg back in?
No, you don't push a goose egg back in. No.
Okay. I
Don't
mean,
feel very good.
No, it didn't. As a child, I can say.
Yeah, no. The one I always heard was, oh, if you have a goose egg, that's okay. It's swelling on the outside of the skull, not swelling on the inside of the skull. It's like, yeah, no, I'm pretty sure when I had my head injury, I had a pretty good goose egg, but it couldn't tell me that I had a subdural hematoma until I got to the hospital.
That's right.
So.
Well, thank you for clearing that up. This is a generational issue.
No problem. And I did. I went through all of those fun stages of, I got very hostile. I started throwing up, and yeah, thankfully my mom was a nurse, and when she heard I hit my head, she knew to come get me.
Yes. So, well, it's important. I think that's important, like, because, kids hit their heads all the time, and you're instantly worried, but knowing that you're really looking for some severely out of character things to follow a severe head injury.
Absolutely. And again, I think the mechanism makes a big difference too. If your kid's just standing up and they're a little 3-foot tall toddler and they fall and hit their head, the likelihood of something serious is much, much smaller than if they're going 15, 20 miles an hour on a bicycle and have a head-on collision without a helmet, So that mechanism makes a difference too.
Or I will bring up the time that I brought my baby to the emergency room because she fell off the bed. Didn't hit her head at all.
That's okay.
But as a new mother,
Absolutely.
It was a very scary moment.
When in doubt, just do it.
That's right. That's right.
And the ERs are great. They actually I can't remember what big hospital system did it, but they did this huge pediatric trauma research about head injuries, and they had this whole fun grading scale and what symptoms you're talking about. How high did they fall from? Did they lose consciousness? Have there been changes in their attitude, nausea? So they have a very good checklist. I think if the ER physicians are doing their jobs well, which most of them are, is they go through that checklist and they kind of weigh the risks and benefit of doing all the workup and the scans and all that. That's, if it's worth it, it's worth it. If it's not, then we just kind of watch them and make sure they do okay. So there's good things in place for if you're ever worried, don't ever hesitate to bring your kid in to be evaluated by a physician. I think that's always the rule of thumb.
That's right. Well, to build on that, is there one thing that you wish parents knew about keeping kids safe outside while also encouraging them to play, explore, and stay active?
Again, I would harp on being part of it. I do think that's important. They learn from us. They learn by watching us. So modeling that behavior is important, but also being diligent about teaching them. I think you do have to take on that role as a parent of being their teacher when it comes to the safety rules. And, we've gotten to the point where we know we can let our kids go play in the backyard because we know it's fenced in. So we don't have that kind of worry, but they've learned the rules of, hey, we don't do backflips off the trampoline. We don't jump on and off the trampoline. We stay on the trampoline or we get off. We had to teach them that over time, or like we have some water toys out back so like they know what they can and can't do. So I think it's important to set up those boundaries, and as your kids get older and they know the boundaries, it gets easier for you to kind of give them that freedom and confidence to go outside. And I just tell parents all the time, don't be afraid to play with your kids. Your kids love when you play with them. And I think that's something we should all take a little bit more pride and joy in, and spending that time with our families. Because again, I think that's something that our kids are going to take to heart and remember. So play with your kids. Go outside. Have the water gun fight. Have the water balloon fight. Go have the bike race, the foot race.
I like it. I like it. Well, speaking of fun, this is our summer safety season. So we're asking everyone, what's your favorite thing about summer?
We are water people. Growing up in Lake Charles, we always had the lakes. So here in Lafayette, we don't have as much access to lakes, but kids love going to the pool. I think that's our big one. And if we can't go to the pool, we're usually bringing out the water table or we have the sprinkler in the backyard or something. So we love being outside and playing in some type of water, anything. So my oldest thinks he learned how to swim last year. He's in for a rude awakening where Dad's still watching him try not to drown. But
right.
we are big water people. And if we can get away with it and get to a beach somewhere, we're always about a beach. So that's our favorite thing to do.
Well, is there anything else you'd like to share that we haven't talked about or that you would want listeners to know?
Well, safety's key. Keep it safe. Like I said, helmets, any gear that you think you might need, and then the boundaries. I think that's the biggest thing. And I think keeping things safe and keeping kids encouraged and doing those things is important. But safety is always key. Even when you don't want to, even when the kids try to talk you out of it, just kind of set up those rules and be safe. And again, that's probably come more so from personal experience, but I'll always harp on the helmets.
That's right. It means we can trust it.
That's right. It's just like seatbelts. You never know. I tell my kids all the time, you're not putting on a seatbelt because I drive like a maniac, but you never know when that maniac might hit us.
Yeah. Yeah. And then they say, no, you are the maniac, Dad.
Yeah. Well,
they keep us honest.
They do.
Well, thank you again for your time, Dr. George.
No
we'll have everything you mentioned linked in the show notes. Cool. And thank you all for listening. We'll be back soon with another episode of Parenting You.